All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here. And look, it's summer. A summer season for Chelsea Football Club can mean only one thing: signing and selling players. That's right, player trade season underway for Chelsea Football Club. Didn't do a whole lot in that extra credit window that they had an opportunity to use at the beginning of June from the 1st to the 10th. But we are going to be talking about Jamie Gittens coming in from Borussia Dortmund to Chelsea Football Club, the left-sided attacker who will be joining Chelsea for a fee that is making people scratch their heads a little bit. But we're going to get into a ton of it. What do we like about the player? What are we seeing from the initial scouting report that we've done? And then really get into a bunch of the questions that you, the listener, had across all of the social media platforms, whether it was Discord, whether it was Twitter. We have a ton of them baked in here as well, too. So look, if we're doing a summer transfer preview special, it is going to be with our good friend Sam, CFC Central. And Sam, in terms of getting ready for this Jamie Gittens pod, can you just maybe go through what you do? What's your standard process for profiling the player? Because I want to make sure people contextualize appropriately before we go on and talk about Jamie Gittens in full breath. What do you actually do to prepare for this episode in terms of the number of games, what you watch, how you put it together for those who maybe are newer to the episodes that we do together?
So basically, I try to be as nuanced in terms of covering all aspects. So sometimes, there's a player that's played multiple positions. So I basically have a small sample size, say 3 to 4 games for each position. If there's been a managerial shift, like there's been one here for Gittens after, January of this year. So I basically had to try and figure out if the system played a part in his form going up and down. So overall, Dan, if I'm lucky, I do somewhere around 6.5, 7 games, depending on sub appearances and stuff. But sometimes, like for Raheem Sterling, I did 14, 15 games for that special that we did together because he played at left wing, at false nine, at right wing, at Liverpool, at Manchester City. So yeah, it basically depends on a lot of different factors. But yeah, for this one, the gods have been kind. So I've basically kept like around 5, 6 games for this one, mostly at left wing because I think that's where he's been, brought into play. So that allows me to go like super deep and figure out what the challenges are, what he does well, what he can improve on, and basically put together, all these reports. So my general procedure is I log every game. I don't use Scout, so I go for every 90 minutes. I log every action every time he touches the ball for 6 games, and then essentially I rewatch those, and essentially I make notes, and then I rewatch it again to make sure that I'm accurate, and then I come on the podcast and hope that I'm well prepared.
And maybe just to, again, contextualize for the listener, when you're profiling for a forward attacker, a left winger, are there certain areas that you're paying attention to for both on the ball and off the ball actions that would help you in the analysis, just to set the stage before we start talking about the history of the player and how they got on Chelsea's radar?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to pay attention to what he does when he has the ball, and most importantly, what his reaction is when he loses the ball. How is he when he doesn't have the ball? Does he have the fundamentals in place? So I also sort of put the microscope on how he shoots. What part of his foot does he use? Does he place it? Does he use power? How good is he in the air? Does he have the mentality? So essentially mapping out, the three major cornerstones of every player. So it's physical, it's mental, it's tactical, and then essentially trying to break apart his game and figure out if we have the right player. And obviously, then you look at Chelsea's system, which you have to be intimately familiar with, and then try to superimpose and juxtapose and see if the player fits in terms of what you have. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of good things for attackers. You get to see. Obviously, most people focus on what they do on the ball, but with attackers, you have to be a little bit more patient. Sometimes they just wander in and out of games. Like there have been games where I've locked something at 16 minutes, and the next time he touches the ball, it's like 32, 33 minutes. So you have to keep paying attention in between when he doesn't have the ball, and hopefully you have like compiled really, really comprehensive picture in terms of what he offers to the team when he doesn't have the ball. So hopefully we have it all covered on this one.
Well, then let's get into a little bit more about Jamie Gittens and just the history. I know you love to put together a story for us, to weave a tale, to make sure we understand the full tapestry of this player. So I will just take my hands off the wheel, and I will let you drive for this next little bit here to give us the story of Jamie.
I'm glad you're coming along for the ride then. So, yeah, basically, Gittens grew up in Berkshire, in Reading, which is about 45 miles away from London. He joined a local under nine side, and if the Bundesliga website is to be believed, he played for the under nine levels for the same club that Michael Olise played at. And after that, he spent some time with, interestingly, the Reading Academy and Chelsea's academy, and he was given chance to join either one. Like he could pick and choose. He refused Chelsea, and he essentially went and spent some time with Reading, and he was 5 years in that age group from under 9 to the under 14s, and then he was snatched up by Manchester City. He joined their under 14 side, and then 2 years after that, he decided to follow the path of a player that he really, really admired in Jadon Sancho, saw him jump to Dortmund early, get his lucky break, and basically set the football world alight. So wanted to take that similar trajectory. So he then moved to Dortmund. Moving to Germany, Dan, wasn't really the smoothest of transitions for things beyond his control. So he basically arrived in the shadow of the COVID pandemic, had to be patient in terms of figuring out his chances, wasn't fit when he arrived. So he was spending a lot of time with a fitness trainer trying to get back to speed and training for first team levels. He played in friendly against Athletic Bilbao, and just I think 15 minutes into the game, he went off injured. Then was told that he had strained multiple ankle ligaments, so he could be out for 4 months. So slowly he started making his way back. And when he did get back, he helped Dortmund under 19 reach the quarterfinals of the UEFA Youth League. And he scored 6 times in 5 games there, which was something that caught the eye of the senior hierarchy. A month after that quarterfinal, he made his debut for Dortmund in a 6-1 win against Wolfsburg. And postseason, he played in the England under 19 squad and helped them win the U19 Euros. He came on in the final as a substitute and interestingly also got subbed. I haven't had the game logged here, but that one would be interesting to watch, I guess, for fun. In the 22-23 season, he made his Champions League debut in the 1-0 win against us, coming on for the goal scorer Karim Adeyemi, who, if you remember, outpaced Enzo Fernandez in those early days under Graham Potter. And he came on in the 79th minute, so got his first taste of European football against us. And last campaign, he essentially hit 15 goals and assists, scoring 4 in the Champions League. Overall for Dortmund, he's featured in about 4,000 minutes over 2 campaigns. And we had the chance to sign him. Obviously, a lot of Manchester City enthusiasts in our hierarchy and in key positions in the club, and we signed him for 55.5 Great British pounds. And there was lots of interest from Bayern Munich apparently, which was quite late, but had his heart set on a move to Chelsea. So interestingly, there's one person who did an interview with Rune Crichton, which is a very, very interesting number one source for the Ruhr-side club. So Dortmund being one of them, and I think Schalke being the other. So Lars Ricken, youth coordinator, in an interview said he's struggled with injuries for a long time, and for him, it's primarily about staying healthy. When he's fully fit, he's a difference maker at an extremely high level. So that's what we're getting done, and hopefully he'll be ready to light the world on fire once he takes to the pitch wearing a Chelsea shirt.
That is exactly what we would hope. So, again, next season can't come soon enough, at least for those of us looking for more Chelsea football to watch and don't love getting a break in terms of that. But look, we're going to take a break here, though, and get an ad break out of the way. So when we come back, we'll talk more about how Jamie Gittens got on at Dortmund, what his strengths were, and maybe what some of those opportunity areas were. But stay tuned, and we'll be right back. All right, Sam. So as we're coming back from the break here, I'd love to talk about primarily last season for Jamie Gittens, just starting off here, and how he really had a chance to, I think, play in his favorite position, had an opportunity to, I think, excel. Again, best senior season as a professional footballer, as a top flight footballer, really setting the stage for this move. And again, you could debate the amount or the price, but you pay what you pay and you pay what the market is asking for players. I'd love to just talk more about like how last season in totality went for Jamie Gittens at Dortmund.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, Dan, because he obviously started as a very favored member of Nuri Sahin's side for Dortmund, and Sahin basically went from the start of the season to, I think he was fired around the 26th of Jan, and the first game for the next manager, Niko Kovac, was on the 2nd of February against Heidenheim. So if I mean, you could basically split the season in half. And the early part of the season, it was all about, you know, playing in his favorite role as a touchline winger on the left hand side. He played once or twice on the right. And Nuri Sahin used a 3-4-3 very early on. Then he switched to a 4-2-3-1. He switched to a 4-3-3, also juggled with a 4-1-4-1. And in that last formation, Gittens played as a wide midfielder, so on the left hand side again. After Kovac took charge his first game in Feb, Gittens again continued playing in that left wing, but the system had shifted. It had gone from wingers always holding width to sometimes a back three where aggressive wing backs pushed, and sort of like the wingers had to come inside to play in those half space positions. And Gittens isn't that, to be very honest. He's out and out just a direct pacey winger. So moving inside presented a lot of challenges, presented a lot of opportunities in terms of how is he interpreting the game, how is he going to stay relevant. And just to give you context, Dan, Gittens started only 9 of the 19 games under Kovac, and he managed over 60 minutes in a game only 6 times, 70 minutes or more only twice. And back threes are quite notorious. We all know that, having seen it firsthand, that they place a lot more onus on the attackers, a lot of individual quality to come and shine in those particular situations. So instead of having, for example, with Sahin, a number 10 in Brandt, Julian Brandt, and then you have, overlaps from left back from Benzebaini, you have a lot of central midfielder runs, underlap sort of. Kirasi would come, drop and link up. So he had multiple options to rotate, fluidly go up and down. That was taken away with like one attacker being missing in the front line. So there was obviously you're playing in the half spaces, which is tough as a winger, and then you have one less option to sort of help you out. So I think it was just tactical. It was also a little bit of his form dropping. I think he scored one goal under Kovac in about 19 games. So that tells its own story. But I think he's still got quality. He's got incredible potential. But yeah, as we will discuss in the coming section, I think it was sort of like a mixed bag for him last season.
And then, maybe kind of looking ahead then. So, strengths. Let's talk about some of the areas where I think if people watch even a highlight, they didn't get necessarily the 6 matches, this full 90s that you've put in here. If they're just watching a quick YouTube highlight video or a comp on X or Blue Sky, like speed, I think tends to be one of the big ones that you see. The way he takes on certain players is definitely, I think, something to be excited about, particularly from like a growth trajectory. And then, the 2-on-1s are really kind of areas where you might expect that to really, really find some kind of strength, the way he excels in those areas.
Absolutely. I think if you look at just the the one core aspect that obviously defines a lot of his skills, a lot of his you know just the strongest abilities that he has, it's definitely his speed, definitely his acceleration. He was the 15th fastest in terms of top speed recorded in the Bundesliga with a scintillating 35.96 kilometers per hour. Only 5 Premier League players recorded quicker times. Just a bit of trivia, you could go in the comments and try to guess who those 5 Premier League players were who were faster than Gittens last season. But yeah, his explosiveness, his ability to just boom, like a roadrunner from a standing start is quite incredible over short and long distances both. I think it's very, very close to the top tier. He's also supremely good as transition outlet, and when you're obviously going on breaks, you can just give him the ball and he will burn the grass for you. But quite interestingly, he prefers being out wide, sort of like a Frank Ribery kind of situation. Like Pep tried moving him centrally at Bayern, saying, "You're so good with your feet, you're two-footed. Try to dribble in those central areas." But Ribery just loved the touchline, and I think Gittens is quite similar in that sense. Likes carrying from wide. If we look at how that translates to his dribbling, he was in the 99th percentile in the top five leagues for dribbles completed. I really wouldn't say that he's world class yet at 1v1s. I think the excellent thing that you can take away is that he's comfortable exploring both ways. So he can go to the byline to cross, but he's equally comfortable coming in on his right foot and shooting. But what you do notice on his 1v1s is that he sort of premeditates. He's got a preference for coming onto his right foot and shooting. And sometimes, even if the defender gives him the opposing cue and there's the window to do something else, he tends to still cut on his right foot. So a little bit of predictability there. I think he can mix it up a bit more. I think the issue with him is that he's more of a proactive dribbler rather than a reactive dribbler. You look at like Kaoru Mitoma, for example, or you look at Usman Dembele. They look for opponents to make a mistake before making up their mind. And I think that's something that Gittens is probably missing for now, but he can definitely, improve it as time comes. But obviously, the speed, the close control, the footwork that he has with both feet make him a menace. When you're 1v1 with him, he's still devastatingly difficult to stop for most fullbacks, and obviously has won five penalties in all competitions over the last two seasons. So if you can get Palmer a little bit of a boost, which he missed last season, so why not have somebody like Gittens on the left wing? And just to also take on from Gary's, then there are obviously what the main problem we see for quicker wingers, the ones that come up against fullbacks and burn them 1v1. By default, the team starts paying more attention to them. So you sort of see 2v1s, 3v1s. Interestingly, Gittens is going through that at Dortmund. He's seen that last season where even before he gets the ball, two players are on him, sometimes three players are on him to try and stop him dribbling. And to his credit, Gittens enjoys that. He sort of finds nifty solutions to break those 2v1s. And I would like to quote a good friend of mine, Seth, from Twitter, who's basically said that there's a term he uses called splitting doubles, which is just how he breaks 2v1s. And one of the ways he does so is that he early on he just explodes between those two guys. So sort of creates a little bit of hesitation for either player, saying who's tackling, who's making that sort of interception or that attempt to win the ball back, and that creates that little bit of chaos for him to thrive on. Obviously he has the speed to capitalize in those situations. And the second thing he does is he drags both players close to the byline, and he essentially tries to go around one of them. So tries to bunch them together until they sort of appear as like one entity, and then he tries to cut in or he goes to the byline. So quite intelligent, quite smart. I think when you are a physical freak, you can sort of give yourself that challenge. Can I beat these two guys? Can I do those take ons? So I think he takes those risks, which is what most wingers suffer from when they come in the Premier League. They get 2v1 and suddenly they lose their enthusiasm to go and dribble, which is something that I can't say about Gittens.
Well, that is exciting from the standpoint of not losing necessarily the enthusiasm for it. It will be interesting to see, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. As just the how does he then involve that or connect with other players in the team, as you were trying to allude to there. We did talk about at the top though about on the ball and then off the ball activity. Could you talk to me about some of the off the ball actions, whether it's his defensive work rate or maybe just his ability to kind of guide movement in terms of disrupting defenses? Like, I think those are things that maybe people would have seen again if they've only watched a little bit and would see them in clips, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper with you on those things.
Absolutely. There were a lot of questions asking about his defensive industry. So we'll start with that one. I do believe that he's genuinely very, very good defensively. Last season he's competed in 10 ground duels on average per 90 minutes, which is a very, very good number for a winger. Most of the times you see him compete in 12, 13. So he's very industrious, has that tenacity, has that affinity for work rate, which most wingers aren't willing to do. You see prodigiously gifted wingers like Rafael Leao, and the one thing that drove me off, despite all his gifts, was just the fact that he doesn't track back, doesn't like defending. His positioning is absolutely garbage. So that's just difficult to come on side with. But yeah, with Gittens, I don't think that's a problem at all. He shows very good reactions to losing the ball, both from himself and when his team loses the ball. So quite selfless in that respect, and he managed a sprint every 2.8 minutes, I think, in the Bundesliga last season, which is quite a nice number. I think it puts him close to the top in terms of overall sprints. I think he recorded around 650, which is nice data that the Bundesliga gives you. So quite intense. You look at his pressing, his counter pressing actions. He's not really somebody who jogs or gives a half-hearted effort, which some Chelsea players, some wide players used to do last season. I think he's very medium to high intensity. He will push. He knows that his speed creates issues. It intimidates defenders because he reaches from point A to point B very, very quickly. So he does that superbly. So I do believe that if you look at him from an individual perspective, he does improve the left side in terms of pressing and the counter pressing. And if you look at all the signings that we've made, Joao Pedro, you look at Jamie Gittens, you look at Liam Delap, all of them feature very, very heavily in terms of pressures, in terms of defensive work, in terms of making those fouls, making those ground duels. So I think the overall idea from the sporting directors was that Maresca likes being very organized. There are going to be a lot of situations where you lose the ball in stable possession, so you need to be able to win it very quickly, and essentially that idea continues with Gittens. The other part of his off the ball, out of possession work, we'll go to movement. I think quantity wise, his movement is great. I think he's very hardworking in terms of how he targets his runs. A lot of the times you see him trying to constantly disorient his fullback even without the ball. He constantly makes runs behind, across. So one of his favorite runs comes when he explodes across his fullback, or sometimes on the blind side behind his fullback and into areas where he can go 1v1 if he gets a long ball in or a ball in behind. So he loves making those runs. He's also like when he played in the half space, which is a good thing that we could take from Niko Kovac's time there. He likes to underlap to the edge of the box, and he basically asks his whoever's holding width on the left hand side to try and give him those curved balls into the box so he can go and essentially get a cross or a cutback from those situations. So we've seen Kukureya do that for Palmer from the left hand side. Palmer, as a left footed player, if he drifts wide, could also offer that to Gittens. So that's an interesting thing. I think a dynamic that we're seeing a lot more fluidity, we're seeing a lot more dynamism between the fullback and the winger and the number 10 in Maresca's system in the Club World Cup. So I think that is encouraging for Gittens. I think it's also maybe Maresca saying, I'm going to get an explosive 1v1 winger and I need to make it pop somehow, which is good on his part. And the last thing I'd probably like to say, Dan, is something that defines his shooting, his movement. It's his ability to separate. It's just how easily he creates a yard between him and the ball, as well as him and his marker. So a lot of the times, because his agility is so incredible, because he's got such good speed, he's able to shift the defender's center of gravity with a dropped shoulder. Sometimes he jinks one way, he explodes the other way. So a lot of the shots that he takes from the central areas, especially against when he's 1v1 against center backs, he gets clean shots off. They're usually unopposed, and basically if he gets the shot right, then your goalkeeper is in a world of trouble. So the separation is a big thing. If you watch him on 1-2s, for example, by the time he receives the second pass, he's already created 2 yards between him and his fullback. So if you can find those balls in behind, which obviously with Enzo, with Palmer, even with Joao Pedro, you do have those players who can find those balls in behind for him. And I think that advantage of creating that extra yard is something that is so, so crucial in the Premier League. So if he has to succeed, I think that particular quality could come very, very handy.
Well, that's going to do it for taking a look at some of those strengths and that he's had. I'd love to then go into maybe some of the areas where we feel like he can improve, but we're going to do that after our last ad break. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, Sam. So this is where the listeners got involved with a bunch of questions here as we take a look about just trying to complete the picture of Jamie Gittens. And again, as a younger player, I think the picture is still coming into focus. But just from what you watch, we're going to start off with Christopher's question, just asking about the one trait Jamie Gittens will need to improve on to adapt to the Premier League as soon as possible. So, what's going to be the one skill, trait, ability that if he works on will help him acclimatize to the Premier League?
I'm going to be generous and give you maybe like a couple more than you've asked for.
Wow.
And
Okay. Well, it's
um,
so nice of you to just be, dispensing that many on a single item here.
no, so we've got. I apologize if I'm butchering your name. It's TK Lote. Dan, you are more familiar with Discord compared to my out tech butt. Please correct me. It's TK Lote, but
Yes, correct.
they basically ask is the finishing over performance remotely replicatable or just fluky? So this is quite interesting because he does have like a good record last season in terms of outperforming his expected goals, which is something you like seeing. And the season before that, at the age of 18, I think he underperformed. So shooting performances are based on a sample size quite difficult for me to give you a complete idea. But what I can sort of analyze is how he shoots, why he shoots, where he shoots. And the good thing about him is he's a two-footed shooter. So very, very good with both feet. He's got 12 league goals for Dortmund last season, five with his left, six with his right, one with his head. And most of the times when he shoots with his right, it's with his instep, lots of power, tries to hit it, straight through the balls. A lot of the times you'll see the slight knuckle effect where it arrows into certain corners. And he obviously we talked about his separation. So the way that he's able to get that gap and then get his shots off is quite impressive. It's very quick and hard to block, even if you are prepared for it and set. So that's going to be quite encouraging. With his left, he tries to place those shots or he tries to go across hard and low. And that power is there basically for him to make it happen. But I wouldn't say he's clinical. I think he's just somebody who relies a lot more on power than he does on placement. And we'll talk a little more about that in terms of, even his shot quantity has waned from 3.66 the season before last to 2.64. So it's actually dropped by almost a shot. And his average shot distance over the past two seasons is about 18 yards. So he's basically shooting from at the edge of the box. And I think that's something that he can improve, and obviously why he has a slightly low conversion rate. He's not somebody who's going to give you 15, 20 goals with those numbers. You need to be closer to goal, you need to be shooting more often, and you need to be basically just very good with how you take those shots. So I think one of those three is check marked from that list, but the other two he needs to consciously improve. So I think shooting positions, shooting quality with his left, and just where he's shooting from. I think that's definitely something I'm looking at.
And then, as EOCNA asked another one on just people talk if he's the key to unlocking deep defenses, but most of his highlights are him blasting past people in wide open space and against unsettled defenses. Help me square this circle. So can you try to drop some additional knowledge here on just his passing and how he helps break the game?
Yeah, so I've basically going off last season, but in my opinion, he's a low quantity, low quality passer, which is not uncommon between in when you look at wingers, he's somebody who just receives a lot of high value passes and usually receives them in very crowded zones. And we use this term, Dan. We've used it a lot on podcast in this podcast, but we talk about gravity, and that term essentially in football is something that denotes a player's quality to attract pressure. So if you have high gravity, if you're somebody with a lot of flair, with a lot of 1v1 ability, then you will attract more pressure. You will attract multiple bodies. So because Gittens is so explosive and because people know of his strengths, the time he gets the ball, he's usually crowded around with two players, three players in the attacking third. Sometimes he has support. Sometimes when he's on transition, because he's so quick, he's by himself. So those pass options are limited. The execution is tougher. So his pass numbers are also by default really bad. I expect it to become a little better at Chelsea, where there's a lot more settled possession, where he will have to play short multiple times before making a choice. But yeah, even when I look at his passing technique, the weight, the timing of release, which option he's picking, I don't think it's quite there yet. I think he's very limited as a creator. I don't expect him to be a wide playmaker of Palmer or Michael Olise's ilk. He's not that, not right now. And I think his most of his production, if any, will come from wide areas through crosses or through cutbacks. And just to give you the numbers, I think last season he had 31 chances created. And then the season before that, I think in terms of per 90, he was just around the same 1.5. So not extremely high like Palmer, who goes 3.5, 4 sometimes. So you have to sort of make sure that he gets into those wide positions, because in those central areas, doesn't really have the eye or the execution to make it happen.
So then, continuing talking about passing, Fahad had the question around maybe actually more just a declarative statement. Would love to hear more about your thoughts on Gittens' crossing ability. So, talking about those wide deliveries, particularly if you're playing on the left wing, crosses into the box, crosses to maybe a Liam Delap or a Nico Jackson or a Joao Pedro running down the center. How does that look for Jamie Gittens as his current profile, and maybe what could we expect in terms of how that might trend over the first part of the Premier League season?
I just want to give a tiny shout out to Fad, who does some excellent work on X Twitter, on Chelsea Twitter, and puts out some lovely content, which is very insightful on tactics and a lot of player profiles. So shout out to you, Fad. Keep up the good work. With deliveries, yeah, in terms of where he ranked for cross completion amongst non-defenders, so no fullbacks, no centre backs in the Bundesliga, he was 141st, and his completion rate was 16.3%, which is very close to peak Branislav Ivanovic at Chelsea. So it was quite bad. And the eye test, though, I think when I look at it, he's got a lot more quality than the numbers suggest. And the one thing that he does very well is that he's got very good, these whipped crosses with his right foot on the left hand side. So in swinging crosses towards the far post, tries to find Daniel Malin, tries to find Seru Girassi in those areas. So has a very nice whipped cross on him. If you give him the space to do that from the half space, from out wide, he will try those things. And on the right hand side, we do have people who can head. Palmer has not really great in the air, but he can pop up sometimes in those areas. So we'll see. Joao Pedro is somebody who can do that. Liam Delap, haven't seen much inside the box, but will be interesting to see how the dynamic changes with a Gittens crossing from that left hand side. But yeah, it's the crossing is good. The numbers not so good, but the season before that the numbers were slightly better. I think his completion rate was 10-11% higher, and crossing is just a low fruit. It doesn't yield very often, so you have to anything near 20-22% is quite good. So I would say he's you know slightly average, above average. So the only thing that I would complain is that a lot of the times when you're on your favorite flank and you are getting the ball, for cutbacks, he usually tries to cut back with his weaker foot. And because he's two-footed, surprisingly, I'll give him the credit. The quality of those deliveries, Dan, are quite good. He finds the target more often than not. They're nice, quickly punched through pressure, and they usually find the target. But I would really like him to see if there's certain ways that he can get it on his stronger foot, and maybe the quality of the deliveries goes up, maybe his key pass numbers go up, maybe his assist number goes up. It's just I feel like they are right now it's good. It's like the trade-off is, do you go for speed, which you can do as with your left foot on the left flank, or do you go for precision with your stronger foot? And that will be interesting to see with Gittens. I think if he can show us a nice sample size of cutbacks with his stronger right without losing time and then sort of being crowded out, I think we might see a nicer production from him creatively.
So then another question here from Drogba with a lot of A's and a lot of H's, not the actual Didier Drogba. Is Gittens ready for the pace and physicality of the Premier League? And if so, can we realistically expect more goal contributions than Sancho next year? So this, I think, is kind of a good maybe baseline because you could have had Jadon Sancho for a lower transfer fee, but potentially a higher wage, weekly wage, if you were willing to concede on that point. You end up spending more to bring Jamie Gittens into the club. I think that is going to be something that people will naturally look to do next season. They will compare and contrast how Jadon Sancho does, how Jadon Sancho did this past season, and what Jamie Gittens did or does in this kind of first season at Chelsea Football Club.
Yeah, I think physically I did a little digging, and apparently his under 19 coach revealed that Gittens had a dislocated shoulder, and because of that, there was a lot of issue. And when he was playing a game after the injury happened, he essentially dislocated it again in the middle of the game and had to basically undergo surgery for it. So the issue is rectified. But it is interesting that he rarely ever goes shoulder to shoulder when off the ball. He tries to avoid it as much as possible, more about nipping in, using his toes to try and like get the ball away, but physically using his body, very reluctant to do so. And he's not got the stature to do it either. He's quite diminutive, so wouldn't expect him to go against PLCBs or like fullbacks and expect to win those physical challenges. Some things I do like from him is that, he uses his arms sort of side on to hold the ball up in certain situations. But what I don't like is for a player who's that fast, who's that quick, who obviously wins a lot of penalties for you, the foul count in terms of drawing fouls is quite low. I think it's somewhere between 1.5 across his career, and that's very, very low. So somebody of his ilk with his skills, I would expect him to win two, 2.5, if lucky, three fouls a game. That would put him, in the elite tier. But I think something that he has to work on and improve because he does cause issues. And even if he's not causing issues, and he's having a bad day, can you win fouls in dangerous areas? Can you get somebody like a Reece James in the position where he scored that free kick from against Benfica? So that would be the question and the challenge that I would pose to Jamie Gittens.
Then, as we maybe shift to areas of weakness, we kind of just covered strengths and we talked about areas where we think he can improve or where we'd like to see him improve, but not every player is perfect. So there are areas that maybe they are more deficient in than others. What are one of the two areas that you saw in those 690s that Jamie Gittens is really not necessarily either maybe gifted at, or you feel like there's going to be a much, much bigger hill to climb to get to a good level with?
Yeah, I think the one thing that stood out for me when logging his actions was just his decision making. I think it's very inconsistent, bordering on frustrating. And a lot of it has to do with, I don't think he's necessarily selfish. I think it would be wrong to call him that, but he does make very erratic calls. Sometimes he has three players in front of him and he shoots into the crowd. Sometimes, he's surrounded by two, three players and then he's got one simple pass away, but he'll essentially try to dribble through the pressure instead of passing. It's just like amateur mistakes, stuff that we've seen Mudrik do. Obviously, not that pronounced and not that often, but there are little things that have frustrated both fans, his teammates. A lot of the times you see his teammates' reactions, being very angry, saying, why are you shooting from 20, 25 yards? We brought up this shooting thing, like he shoots from way, way off, like 18-yard box minimum. So a lot of the times he's taking pop shots, and that's an issue that even people have seen Madueke with. And I think it also overshadows a lot of Madueke's good work. The fact that he was at one point in time, I don't know if he finished this, but he was the guy with the most touches in the penalty box with around 8.5, which is an incredible amount. So can you make your decision making better? Can you be less selfish? Can you rely less on hero ball and more about caring about the unit, which obviously Maresca does as a manager? I think that's something that I would genuinely ask him. Um, the ball hogging tendencies, head down dribbling, reduced scanning when he's under pressure, doesn't really look around. So I think it also reduces his vision in terms of mapping out the pitch, his options. doesn't really see them under pressure. So that would be like a major, major improvement for me. Like you have to work on those things in the Premier League. It's going to be faster. You're going to be up against stronger players who close down quicker. Bundesliga is very good physically, so I think the transition there will be quite similar. But he will definitely have to curb those tendencies, in my opinion. And the other one, Dan, is quite obvious. Just he's just aerially, he's dreadful. He's got a decent leap, I would say, even a good leap, and at times I've seen him jump well and win the ball, but every time he goes for contested balls, when there's a little bit of pressure, he tries to turn basically away from the engagement. So he slightly like turns, spins away from where the ball is and ends up heading it nowhere. So the power, the accuracy, and the headers is near impossible in those situations. His height, I would say, is at 178 centimeters, is not really somebody who's going to cause a lot of issues. But obviously, Kukurea is 3 centimeters shorter, and we've seen the kind of damage he does from headers. But when I'm looking at just the intent, the aggression, how you attack those crosses, I don't think he has that. I generally don't think he'll ever be a far post threat for crosses. But the good thing is Maresca has worked with those kind of attackers. He's talked to Fatawu, he's talked to, Mavididi at Leicester, and both of them sort of talked about how Maresca told him to crash the far post, crash the box for headers, and they did get some headers in that Leicester season. So maybe there's hope yet, but I don't see that intent, and that sort of tells me that he's really going to struggle in the air. So might not use him in those far post areas, which is a pity because we wanted somebody who can do that at the left hand side. Joao Pedro, for example, if you play him on the left, he's very good in the air inside the box, has scored a lot of headers. So I don't see that with Gittens. So it's something that I don't think will improve either.
So then let's shift to just general tactical fit and a couple of listener questions as we get into one I think generally people like to, or rather helps them understand a player a little bit more intimately, is trying to figure out who they compare against really well. So we had Sasha and Connor asking questions related to who is a similar profile that we can compare him to as a player, and then are there things in terms of like dribbling style in particular that he compares against really well. So can you go a little bit deeper into like the types of players that if you want to give maybe a good comp, like a very comparable, and like a hey, if they got really really good as a player, here's who they could be eventually.
I do come to mind, and I think one is obviously the guy that Manchester City paid an identical fee for, 55.5 million. I would say Jeremy Doku. Doku, I would say, is a little more honed in terms of his final decisions, his actions, a lot more injury prone, but also two-footed, can play both flanks and equally devastating when he's 1v1. So I think Doku is like his dribbling style in terms of what he's thinking when he's 1v1. I would say like that comparison is there for me. I did ask a couple of Dortmund fans and basically Bundesliga watchers, and they said Karim Adeyemi, his teammate, would probably be a good fit as well. I mean, Adeyemi has also played centrally. He's played as in forward positions, which Gittens has, I think, at under 19 level for England, but hasn't really done that as a starter or for pronounced periods at Dortmund. So I would say maybe Doku is somebody who reminds me of him. Not yet at the elite tier. So I would say that Doku is slightly better, but would be a good comp in terms of what to expect from him.
And then as we kind of go to the tactical fit at Chelsea, I had a couple questions from Dieter and Shane, just kind of getting an idea of like what position he would play. And I think maybe we've decided that's going to be left wing, but you might have a crazy off the wall kind of element there. And then kind of the opinion on the transfer fee. And then also Shane was more in particular was how do you rate his ability to kick a soccer ball compared to our other quote dribbly boys, Neto, Sancho, Madueke, George, close quote.
I mean, I'm going to be very conventional here and say I think left wing is by far, as a touchline winger, by far is his best position. I don't think there's much debate there. I have seen, I wouldn't say as much as I would like, but I would have seen a couple of times when he switched to the right wing, and I've tried to figure out like what he does there. I don't think his crossing is good enough from there. I think his movement suffers. I think his shots are taken away. It's like playing Madueke on the left hand side. So I don't think you should play Gittens on the right. You think you should definitely try and play him where he likes it. He's shown that he's quite, high flair in terms of step overs, in terms of deceiving people, going both ways, getting some really, really ripping shots away on target, and scoring some absolute doozies. So the left wing for me, if I've got to address Dieter, that's definitely the strongest position. Is he worth the fee? I don't know. I mean, fee questions always make me a little nervous. I really don't know what to say, but I think we've overpaid a little more than I would like. If he was somewhere around 40, which I would say is the fee that we paid for Madueke, I think is something that I would be happy with. But I think 15 million more is definitely, I don't know. It's not bad, but I think it's just a little more than we would pay for. So I still think he has a lot of improvement to do. There are a lot of question marks in terms of can he do it and whether he'll fit into what Madagascar is trying to do. There are some encouraging signs lately, but we'll see how it shifts when he comes into the side. But that would be definitely my answer to Dieter. For Shane, in terms of ability to kick a soccer ball, I don't know if this is in relevance to his shooting as in particular, or just his overall fit as like the ranking at LW. I mean, well, the price determines that, Dan, doesn't it? I mean, if you pay 55 million for somebody, he's almost certainly starting. And obviously, if he's from the City Academy, then he's definitely got another, bonus point there. So I do expect him to be over Tyreek George. George, I think, struggles a little bit with the separation, and his shots are deceptively good. Like there's no, I wouldn't say it's like rip roaring shots. We've seen a couple of nice ones for Chelsea, but in academy level, when he would take a shot, it would just feel like it doesn't have enough power, but it would just float into the top corner. And so I think he's deceptively good at shooting, but the separation, the explosiveness of Gittens, which I'm not saying Tyreek is bad, I'm just saying Gittens is that good. So that is quite interesting. But I think definitely if you gave me a choice between Tyreek and Gittens, I would definitely keep Tyreek on loan, give him the first team experience he needs, and I think he could definitely compete. But among the wingers, left wing, I think Gittens is an out and out first choice.
So then, around expectations, we've done this before in other previews. Siddharth asking the question of, given our attacking options and goals for this season, what are some reasonable expectations for Gittens? And the way that we framed this before, Sam, and for those listeners who haven't joined us for one of these episodes before, is that we tend to set what is a good season and a great season for the player coming into Chelsea. So what would be a very good season across all competitions, knowing that Chelsea will be playing in the Premier League, in the Champions League, in both domestic cups? So you have a high number of games available to the player. What would that good and what would that great season be from him?
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. I do think he is ready in terms of the speed of the Premier League. I don't know what the physical, adaptation will be and how quickly he'll get there, but I would definitely look at his numbers in the Bundesliga and say that there is a good chance that there is like slight adjustment, and no more than that. So if he's got 11 goals and assists, which is his best contribution in 21 starts, then maybe around that number would be a decent enough first season. I don't expect him to, go and uproot trees and hit 15 goals. I generally don't see it. But a great season would be hitting that number where he's able to get, I don't think he'll be somewhere like 10 goals and 8 assists. I think he's more likely to be at something like 14 goals or 3 assists if he gets a great season. But that's where I expect him to be. If you can isolate him well, if you can rely on certain fast breaks, if you can give him the movement with Kukureya, which we're seeing some interesting signs, he's no longer playing that solely that number 10 attacking midfielder role, or he's no longer being in the back line. He's moving into the box. He's also overlapping. He's doing some really good rotations. You see Palmer also drift out. You see Enzo drift in to underlaps. So there is a lot going on, which is nicer from Maresca to see. So I'm encouraged that he might go and get somewhere close to 15 goals and assists. Most likely, maybe like 10 goals and 3 assists. I would say 13 to 15 would be a good season for me, provided he's starting all of them. But I also have a couple of doubts in terms of like how well, the 90-minute multiple competition sort of rule applies. If
Mm.
I look at his league minutes, I mean, he's not played more than 2,000 minutes in the league. He's not started more than 21 games in any of his senior career. So that will be interesting to see, because we do know those explosive wingers tend to get injured the longer the minutes stretch and the longer the game goes. But the hope is, with the depth that we've given Maresca, there will be good rotation and there will be good rest, and hopefully we'll keep him fresh.
And then just kind of rounding it out here then. Ceiling and floor. Nick Anderson asking the question, what is the ceiling and what is the floor for Jamie Gittens? This is kind of goes back a little bit to the comp question, but I think if Jamie Gittens across 7 years at Chelsea Football Club and maybe an extension does really, really well, where would like great be and where would a base level be in terms of like if he just checks a box, what did he hit for us? And if he excelled immensely, where did he go?
Mm. I think if he stays the same, like if he doesn't, he only makes marginal gains, let's say, in his game, in terms of how his weaknesses are and the issues to improve that we mentioned. I think his best at that point would probably be Dembele's worst, where we've seen Osman Dembele at Barcelona in his initial season, and we always thought, with the speed, with the two-footedness, with even like the industry that he shows, that you have a player who's just primed to explode anytime. And Dembele was that for the longest time. We all saw him at Dortmund for Tuchel. We saw him, absolutely break out, and we're just waiting for that season. But you look at his numbers. He reached Barcelona, 3 goals, 6 assists first season, 8 goals, 5 assists next season, 1 goal. After that, 6 goals, three assists. Then there was a season where he had 1 goal and 13 assists. So that's where you thought, okay, is he finally ready to explode? And then next season he was back to 5 and 7. And it took him the age of 27, after all those years of waiting and waiting, to actually go and hit 27 goals and assists for PSG in the league. So I think it could be that with Gittens, where he's doesn't have the creativity to essentially, accentuate what his output is for the side, but he's also explosive. He's a game breaker who you can bring after the 60-minute mark when the spaces open up, and you can ask him to run at people and essentially pin a very aggressive fullback, exploit tiring legs. That would be a great use of Gittens, in my opinion, but that is if he's not good enough as a starter. But if he does improve, if he does, like, sort of clean up his act and essentially polish the edges and make sure that he's working hard enough on those areas, I could easily see him closer to somebody like a Kingsley Coman, who I really like. Hopefully not as injury prone, somebody who's very good on the wings, who can essentially offer both a healthy goal number but also like a nice assist number there. So I would probably say like that's a nice comparison to have. But if he does improve those decision making things, if he does improve how well he copes physically, then I really think that there's a really good player in there. In terms of how much space the Bundesliga gives, it's easy to see his strengths come out, but definitely adapting to the same thing in the Premier League without the spaces, without that level of support. Because you look at Dortmund's tactics, so many good underlaps from Benzebaini, like constant. Every single time Gittins received the ball, there was either an underlap, either an overlap, or both. And I genuinely strongly believe the reason why our wingers failed was because we didn't have that last season. So it'll be very interesting to see how it happens for Gittins. If he gets that support, if we do offer him the right kind of service, he could just explode. But I do think he'll have like a good to a pretty good season. That's my prediction. He will struggle in spells where he will look very frustrated against certain sides, but against the Champions League sides, especially in the group stages, I expect him to do very well.
Well, and that would be particularly if we can carry someone like Pedro Neto into the season with the form that he's had in the FIFA Club World Cup. If we can, get Liam Delap running on all cylinders, if Cole Palmer is, in kind of fine spirits heading into the start of the season, I think all those things could make it where Jamie Gittens will feel a little bit better about the style of football that he'll get to play, given that there won't be maybe as much pressure immediately for him to be the contributor, which is, I guess, the nice way that I think this team is starting to fill out, Sam. And I know that there's still plenty of questions related to how this team will look at the start of the season, what other transfers Chelsea are looking to get done from an attacking perspective. But it does feel as if, with some of the seasons we had from our players last year, or just maybe the combined 2 seasons for a Cole Palmer or for a Nico or for Liam Delap coming in, like there is going to be an ability for players like Jamie Gittens to develop on the job that in maybe prior seasons where we needed every single player to hit, that you have a little bit more flexibility. Not a ton, but a little bit more.
Definitely. I mean, it's hard to sometimes remember that he's turning 21 in less than a month. So he's still got such a long way ahead of him, and essentially you expect him to make strides in a lot of areas where he does appear lacking or inadequate, and I think you can expect him against high quality opposition. I've had interviews with his coaches, and they define him as a very humble, down to earth guy who's willing to learn, loves those challenges. So it does seem like, in terms of a very motivated individual, you have that. There's a hierarchy that understands his game, what he can do. But I think even with Mudrik, sometimes the chaos factor, and just maybe all of us wishing that Mudrik had sort of that intelligence, that game sort of sense to go with his physical gifts. That would have been so nice to see. And I think Gittens offers a slightly advanced version of Mudrik. Younger, more room to improve. Maybe that's what we've been missing on the left hand side, where people were frustrated with Sancho slowing down moves, drawing a lot of pressure, and basically like doing everything that Gittens is not good at, which is drawing 2 people, 3 people, finding those cute passes into areas for other people. If Gittens can improve those things, if he can understand the space that he creates, if he can learn to find those passes, then the sky is the limit. But for now, I think there's a lot to work on. I think it'll take him a year of putting in some decent performances to realize where he's at. But definitely a good player, somebody who people will love watching, because he's just like, sit on the edge of your seat kind of player. He's explosive. He's breathtaking, exhilarating when he sprints at full speed on certain counterattacks. He will be absolutely sensational to watch when he puts somebody on the floor. So those aspects fans enjoy, and hopefully there'll be the output to back it up.
Well, look, we expect tons more questions, comments, discussion around Jamie Gittens before he ever gets to kick a ball for Chelsea Football Club. But we're going to wait until the start of the Premier League campaign for the 25-26 season before we get a chance to do that. But look, Chelsea have more business they got done. We are going to get our Joao Pedro episode out in short order. We're going to probably have a few more, I imagine, with the way that Chelsea have been in the transfer market, episodes that Sam and I will do together. And plus, again, Chelsea are still in the FIFA Club World Cup, playing Palmeiras for potentially a next round opportunity. And feels very, very exciting at the moment. But look, that's going to do it for this one. So thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review, comment on the content, sign up for our free weekly newsletter, and get involved in the Discord community if you can. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep blue flag flying high.